Ashley Wewell, registered dietitian with Coastline Elderly Services, and this is Cooking Healthy with Coastline. Today we're going to be making a bánh mì sandwich, which is traditionally a Vietnamese-based sandwich with a little bit of French influence. The Vietnamese bánh mì sandwich actually is usually composed of very thinly sliced pork, sometimes chicken or another type of meat. And it also is composed of pickled vegetables, typically cucumbers, carrots, and jalapenos. So there is a little bit of spice in this dish. Today we're going to be doing a fun, more maybe modernized approach to this traditional sandwich and be making it into a turkey burger. So we'll be making our turkey bánh mì burgers. We are going to be using lean ground turkey today. And we're also still going to be using our cucumbers, carrots, and our jalapenos. So we're still going to be getting in some lean protein, which we know is very important, and then our vegetables, some of the fiber from there. So we'll get started first. You are going to be pickling your own vegetables, so this does only take about maybe 10 minutes. So we're going to be using 1 cucumber, and we have 2 carrots already peeled over here. You do want to make sure that you're still cleaning your vegetables, peeling away that skin, and just making sure it's nice and clean. So we'll get about a medium-sized bowl for our pickling, and we're just going to cut our carrots into matchsticks. So I'm going to cut them into thirds here, and then cut them into smaller pieces, cut it in half, and then we'll just try to make little tiny matchstick. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You could also, if you don't have regular carrots at home like these, you could use baby carrots still. Those would be fine. They just might be a little bit more tricky to cut up, so you just want to be careful with doing that. So this recipe calls for 1 carrot. I have 2 here, but we'll use about 1.5. And we also have, the recipe calls for 1 cucumber. Our cucumber is pretty big, so maybe we'll only use half of that too. Again, just making it into little matchstick size. If you want to save yourself even more time, you could probably also buy the types of carrots that are already cut into little tiny pieces. So we'll do 1 more, and then that'll probably be enough for carrots. And of course, if you like more carrots than cucumbers, you can leave that up to you. So we're getting lots of vitamin A from our carrots in this, which is great. If you don't know, vitamin A is really good for eyesight. So our cucumbers, we're actually going to do the same thing. We're going to be cutting it into our matchsticks. So again, I cut it in half. I'm going to cut it in half one more time, just to make it a little bit easier. And then cut those into matchstick sizes. If you want to get really technical, you can make them even smaller. But we're kind of just giving it like a rough chop. So these slices, they are a little bit bigger, so I might try to make them just a tiny bit smaller. There we go. So that's kind of like the size that we're looking for right there. Now, since I know usually when I think about pickling vegetables, I think about how those vegetables should be sitting there for a while to get like that nice flavor profile. These are going to be quick pickled, so you'd be surprised, even after sitting in the refrigerator for only 10 minutes, they do get like that nice like tartness to them. So we're going to be, once we cut these up, we'll be using water and rice vinegar for it. And it does work relatively quickly. So this isn't something that you have to make ahead of time, which is good if you're kind of on a time crunch. So we got our cucumber and our carrots done. I'm going to grab the jalapeno. If you are not a huge fan of spice, you could cut this in half and remove the seeds. But if you do like spice, then I would keep the jalapeno seeds in. And you want to try to cut this a little bit thinner so you don't get big chunks of jalapeno. Of course, if you prefer bigger pieces of jalapeno, that's gonna be fine. So the jalapeno though is gonna add some nice spice to it. Jalapeno is sometimes, they can either be really mild in spice or you'd be surprised and they pack a real punch. So you kind of don't know what you're gonna get when it comes to jalapenos, but either way, it's gonna be very delicious. So there we have it. We have all of our ingredients together. Now I'm gonna add in our water. Well, actually, we're first gonna add a tablespoon of our salt. You can use regular kosher salt, sea salt, whatever you have on hand. So again, 1 tablespoon of this, and we're gonna add it right to our ingredients here and give it a quick stir just to coat them in the salt. And then we'll go ahead and add a 1/4 cup of water. And then I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of our rice vinegar. Now I would say that you should try to use, they have different flavors of rice vinegar. Try to go for the unseasoned one. I'm also using a lower sodium option. So if you're someone who is trying to watch your sodium intake, I would be on the lookout for the lower sodium, light seasoned. So we're just gonna give it another stir. And then there's one more ingredient that goes into this, and that is our sugar. So for this, for the pickling process, you're gonna use 1 tablespoon of sugar, just some granulated sugar, and add that in there. And again, just give it a quick stir, trying to make sure everything is well incorporated. And then we're going to place this in the fridge and let it soak up all those juices while we prepare our burgers. So I'll pop that in the fridge. And also, those will last in your fridge for a few days. So if you don't end up using all of them, or if you want to use them for another recipe, they will last up to about 4 to 5 days. So good thing to just note there. All right, so we're gonna get started on our turkey burgers. Like I said, we have our ground turkey mix. We are using an 85% lean to 15% fat for this one. If you wanna go a little bit leaner, you could do the 90% and go from there. But I think sometimes it's a little bit better when you're making turkey burgers that you don't really want them to be super dry. It's not like meat, like red meat. So we do want to go, for me personally, I like to go a little bit higher on the fat content for these burgers. But if you are, everyone has different goals, you could always go for the leaner option. So for this, you could always prepare your burgers actually like on a grill. Right now it is summertime, so it is a good chance to get outside if you have that option. But today we're going to be using a cast iron grill pan. I had my pan in the oven at 400 degrees, and it was in the oven for about 20 minutes, and we got it nice and hot. So if you are using a cast iron skillet or a grill pan, I do suggest preheating it in your oven prior to using it. It can actually help with any stickage that you may have with your meats. It hopefully won't stick too much. So I had already pre-greased my pan, but I'm gonna add just a little bit more oil just to make sure that it's nice and coated, and we're gonna let that heat up a little bit more. I have it set to about medium-high heat on the stove. And so let's get started on our burgers. So like I said, I have 1 pound of ground turkey. We'll get that out and put that in our bowl. Discard of that. And then we are going to be using 1 tablespoon of sesame seed oil. Now this will add in a nice like smoky profile to it a little bit. I have a toasted sesame oil, so we're gonna be using 1 tablespoon of that. The recipe actually calls for fish sauce. Now that's not typically a recipe or an ingredient, I'm sorry, that you would have in your pantry. So instead today I am using low sodium soy sauce. So again, a tablespoon of that. we're going to be using some cornstarch just to help the patty stick together a little bit better. So we're going to be using about a tablespoon or a teaspoon and a half of that. And then a little bit of sriracha. So we're packing in heat from our vegetables. We're adding a little bit of heat to our turkey meat. And then we're also going to be adding a little more sriracha mayo on top of it. So if you're someone who's really not into spice, you can totally leave out the sriracha here. But we're going to be adding in about half of this. This is 2 tablespoons. I'm going to go for about 1 tablespoon. And again, but if you're the opposite and you really enjoy heat, go ahead and add a little bit more. And then there are 2 more ingredients that we need to add to this, and that is just going to be our green onions. You can grab it from here. We have 2 green onions, and that is going to be used in place of using like a red onion or a white onion. It's just going to add some nice freshness to it. And then we also have 2 cloves of garlic that we're going to be prepping. So when it comes to green onion, you're just going to want to cut off that white part at the end and discard it. You don't want to eat that. And we're just going to try to chop this into smaller pieces. You can go as thin as you like, but we're going to use the whole thing and put that into our mixture. And then also too, a lot of the time green onions are used as, you know, garnish, but they also taste so good inside recipes. I do recommend washing them, just like any of your vegetables that you have at home, washing them before you use them. And then I'm just going to put that in our bowl. Get these out of the way. And then our last ingredient are going to be 2 cloves. So I actually already peeled them, and I did bring my garlic smasher. So instead of chopping it up today, we're going to be using that to save a little bit of time. Sometimes cutting up garlic can be a little time consuming. It gets a little gross on your hands. For me, this is like a great tool in the kitchen. Saves me a lot of time and frustration. You could also use minced garlic from the jar if you have that at home. That's also a good option. And then we'll get our second one in. So that was 2 cloves of garlic, 2 scallions, to our pound of turkey, and then some of our other ingredients. So we'll get that out of the way. And that's really it. So we're going to combine these ingredients together. And you want to just make sure that, you want everything well incorporated. Don't want to over mix too much because it will get a little bit harder to kind of form those patties that we're looking for. So we're going to make sure this is well combined. You can kind of fold it over itself. And as you can see, it's starting to come together pretty quickly. And we're getting lots of green onion in there. So this will really pack a ton of flavor. And if you have noticed, I didn't add any salt to that, to our mixture. And that's because the sodium is really coming from our soy sauce that we're using. So it really doesn't need any more salt added to it. All right, so that looks pretty good to me. So I actually have a scale that I'm going to be using. Now, if you're at home, you don't have a scale, that's totally fine. You can eyeball it. So I have it set to ounces, and we're gonna try to see if we can get 4 ounces per patty. So this one is just a little bit more. So we're right at 4. So for this, if you want, you can also put a little bit of cornstarch on your hands if it does feel a little bit sticky, or maybe add a little more cornstarch to the turkey patty. But I'm just going to form a small patty in my hand, and it should look like that. So I'm gonna go ahead, I think our pan is nice and hot, and turn that up just a little bit. And I'm gonna pop that in there. and then we'll get going with the other bunch. So like I said, it's a pound of turkey, so in an ideal world, you should get about 4 patties. We'll see what that looks like. Oh, a little too much. And I mean too, if you're at home, it's just you, and you want to make bigger patties, that's totally fine. I usually think 4 ounces is a good size for a burger. Or if you want to make smash burgers, that is another option too. They could be smaller. All right, get that in the pan. Another option, if say you don't really like handling ground meat like this, or if it's not your cup of tea, you could always do frozen turkey burgers, and you may not be able to add a lot of the seasoning that we're using today, but if you still wanted to use the pickled vegetables, that could be an option too. And then along with the cilantro and the other toppings that we'll be using, it would still be very tasty. Another good lean protein that you could use for these burgers would be like ground chicken. So if you're not really a ground turkey person, if having a turkey burger doesn't sound good, chicken would also be a great option. Or maybe you're just a red meat person. You could always just go with red meat. Might be a little different, but. So we got our burgers on there. I'm gonna turn the heat up high on this. Get it going, and we're gonna let those sizzle for a bit. All right, so our burgers have been grilling now for about 5 or so minutes. We're gonna just give it a light flip. Now on your stove, the time might be a little bit different. If you are cooking on a gas stove, we are obviously using an electric stove here in our studio, so the cooking time might vary a little bit at home. But we're gonna give our 2 back patties here a little bit longer. A little bit of heat distribution here. But typically we want about 4 to 5 minutes per side. We are cooking our patties, since this is a poultry, we do want to cook it to about 165. If we are, at 162-ish, it's gonna rise up to 165. Our final cooking temperature though should definitely hit that 165 mark. That's when you know that cooking any sort of poultry, whether it's chicken or turkey, that it's gonna be safe to eat. Where that may vary if you are cooking with red meat. But for today, we wanna try to get that internal temperature at 165. And I did bring a thermometer, so we'll double check before we're done. Well, we'll give this guy a little flip, getting a little bit of char marks here, which is what we want to see. And this back guy, he's a little bit bigger, so he's going to take longer. So if you do make burgers or burger patties that are a little bit bigger, you want to just try to push them down a little bit, try to get that heat evenly dispersed throughout the patty. So cooking with a spatula like what I have here is really great for cooking burgers, frying eggs. It can really get underneath your item pretty easily, and just handles like greasy foods like this a little bit easier than our traditional spatula. So this meal really is going to be a great summer staple. We have our lean proteins, which we're always looking for. We are fitting in some high fiber foods in here with our zucchini and our carrots. We're also getting in some benefits from our green onions, our garlic, which we know is going to have anti-inflammatory properties. We also have a little bit of garnish from our cilantro, providing a little bit of vitamin and nutrients there. And then we're also going to be using some potato buns. If you want, you could always pack in more fiber by using a whole wheat patty. Or if you're looking for a different type of flavor, you could also use like a brioche bun. That's going to add a little bit more of a buttery flavor to it. But today we are sticking with a traditional potato bun with sesame seeds. This sandwich too could pair really well if you make your own sweet potato fries at home. If you have a side salad, again, it's going to be a great incorporation into your summer barbecue. And a little bit different than traditional burgers and hot dogs. So another good rule of thumb, or maybe a cooking guide, when you are cooking even red meat, any type of meat, is like the pushback that the meat gives you. So if it starts to feel, especially with chicken or poultry, things like that, if it starts to feel, you know, it's not bouncing back as much at you, or it's not as soft, I should say, then you're getting closer to it being completely cooked through. Same thing when it comes to like red meat. A lot of cooks, when even probably home cooks probably know this, but when you're cooking with red meat, the different types of, like if you like medium, well done, rare, things like that, is by like the thickness of your thumb or like this part of your hand. So if it feels like really stiff like that, then you know that you've cooked your burger all the way through. Just a fun little tip if you didn't know. So it's starting to feel like our burgers are really getting there. Our top two might be done beforehand. So we're gonna let those sit just a little bit more. I'm gonna stop playing with them, and I'm gonna get our pickled vegetables out of the refrigerator. So we have our vegetables from not even 10 minutes ago, and they should be good to go. Just gonna grab a little spatula, or we'll use tongs for this. That'll be easier with assembling. We're going to give them another quick stir just to make sure that all that sugar and that salt is really incorporated into our vegetables. And again, the longer this sits, the better it's gonna taste. But we'll give those a go. And then we'll start getting our burgers ready. So we'll at least get 2 of our patties. So for our burgers, with everything else, we're also gonna be using sriracha mayo. I have pre-made sriracha mayo here by Kinkoman. If you don't have this at home, but you already have mayo and sriracha sauce at home, you can easily make your own. Typically, it would be about a 1/4 cup of mayo. We typically recommend using like a light mayo just to watch that fat content, because mayonnaise can be typically on the higher fat content side. And then we'll say about a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of sriracha. Again, it kind of depends on what you prefer for spice. So if you like a little bit more of a kick, I would add more sriracha. But like I said, we're using our pre-made sriracha mayo, which has a pretty nice kick to it. We're gonna add it to our buns here. And I typically like to have condiments on both the top and bottom parts of my buns. So that way there is plenty of flavor with each bite. So maybe if at home you want to just do the mayonnaise and then have some extra sriracha, you could do the mayo on top, sriracha on the bottom, or you can do like what I'm doing here. So we're just gonna make sure that each has enough. Nice and coated. And then we're going to put we'll put the pickled vegetables on the bottom of our patty. So that way our burger actually lays a little bit flatter, which is what we'll want. So I'm just gonna try to get like an even amount of like the cucumber and the carrot. We're just gonna evenly lay that over there. And if you've ever worked with a dietitian, or if you've watched Cooking Healthy with Coastline before, we've said it plenty of times, but most of our meals, we always want to try to get in some form of color. And we're getting plenty of color here from our carrots and our cucumbers. So an additional garnish too that we're gonna be using is our cilantro. I'm gonna save that for the end. And we're gonna check one more time on those burgers. Give them a small flip maybe, just to make sure that they're evenly cooked through. And they are looking really good. Now we're really getting those grill marks that you like to see. And like I was saying, you can feel that they are definitely close to being done. This one looks really good. I would want this one if it were mine. Oh yeah, so these burgers are definitely looking like they're ready to go. So I'm gonna say that this guy is ready, but again, we're gonna double check with our thermometer. Now this doesn't take too long, but you wanna, if you've ever or you haven't used a thermometer like this has a little dimple on it, so you want to try to stick the thermometer into the thickest part of the meat or the burger that you're cooking and try to get it to the dimple that's on the thermometer. And like I said, we want to make sure that we're getting to 165 for these burgers. And right now I'm at 160. And two, you don't want to push through and then accidentally hit the pan, because then you'll get a wrong reading. So that guy actually needs just a little bit longer. And we want to just give it a few seconds for it to cook through, or heat up, I mean. So these guys are looking pretty good. I will say it's really important to practice food safety at home. Sometimes we get a little comfortable at home and you know, you don't think about it as often, but we want to make sure that all this nutritious food that we're cooking doesn't make us sick. So because this guy in the corner is a little bit bigger than our other three, he's going to need a little bit longer. So we'll give it just a few more seconds. But our friend here in the top corner should be good to go. So we'll plate him. Give these a little bit more. And if you ever notice too, and if you're using a cast iron at home, another tip would be if you start to notice that your item is getting really brown and it's starting to smoke a lot, you can always throw it into the oven. You can preheat your oven to like 350 or 375, and that will continue to cook it without actually, you know, burning that outside. So I'm going to turn off my oven and move this off the heat. And because it's a cast iron skillet, it's very hot. So you want to just be careful, and those will continue to cook. All right. So now just real quick, we are going to chop up some of our cilantro. Grab a clean knife for this. All right, so I already washed my cilantro very thoroughly and dried it off. And we're just gonna cut from the top and give this a rough chop. You could also just rip it right off, and if you want the whole leaves, but we're just gonna place a little bit on top here to give it some extra flavor. If you don't like cilantro, you could totally leave this out. But like I said, in a traditional banh mi sandwich, they do put some cilantro for some extra flavor. So there we go. We have our burger and our second burger. So that's it. Here are our banh mi turkey burgers, packed with protein, fiber, and lots of flavor. And my name is Ashley Wewell. I'm the registered dietitian with Coastline Elderly Services, and this has been Cooking Healthy with Coastline. Thanks.